Hello, hello. Welcome to the Five Talents Podcast. I'm your host, Abel Pacheco. I interview the top commercial real estate investors and industry experts so you can learn from their experiences. So if you're an investor, a high W-2 earner, or real estate or tech sales professional that wants to invest in real estate without having to manage properties or leave your day job, then this podcast is for you. Or if you're already investing in real estate, but you're doing it part-time and you want to become a full-time multifamily or full-time commercial real estate investor, this podcast is for you too. You're going to learn a ton. You will learn from real-life multifamily investors and other professionals in the industry. They're going to share their blueprints for success, and I'm super excited that you're here. So I hope you enjoy the show.
Yep.
Hello, hello. Abel Pacheco here. I'm your host for the Five Talents Podcast. I'm with Five Talents Commercial Real Estate. This show, we really talk about multifamily investing, paths to financial freedom. And I brought on a guest, Mr. Brian Briscoe. He is one of those individuals that you want to learn from. So if you don't have a pen in front of you, if you don't have a notepad, I would do so now. And Brian, let me first, let me let you say hello and introduce yourself. But I do want to cover your bio in just a second. So how's it going, Brian?
Doing well. Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate this opportunity. And we've exchanged posts and stuff on LinkedIn for so long. I'm excited to finally talk with you.
Yeah. So me and Brian, I've had engagement, interaction. We've been LinkedIn kind of back and forth, and which is kind of cool. The fact that you can network with somebody, never, literally shook your hand before, but I already kind of feel following your content, following the valuable, information. I know that you started a new podcast, which I'm excited to kind of hear some of the episodes in the future as well. And, a lot of content, a lot of engagement around you. So I was super happy when you agreed to come on the show, man. Thank you.
Yeah, feelings mutual. I was happy to be on the show and to talk with you again. This is great.
So for those that are not in Brian Briscoe's world, he is the co-founder of the multifamily investing firm Four Oaks Capital, or co-founder. And I know you're currently in about $7.5 million in assets under management. Mm-hmm. You just started, your new podcast, a host of it, Diary of an Apartment Investor, which I heard is doing really well so far, and man, excited for you. So you bring a lot of experience, both, and inspiring investors together on every episode, right, Brian?
Yeah, and it's something that we wanted to be different, and provide as much value as possible. And we kind of put our heads together and kind of figured out, okay, what's who our target audience was and everything else. And, brainstorm session between me and my partners, we had this idea, experienced and aspiring investor. And it's really turned into mentorship on a podcast in a lot of cases, because the aspiring investors are coming with their problems and their questions. And, they're asking experienced investors point blank, hey, I need help with X. What would you recommend that I do? And I'm absolutely amazed at, just the quality of the experienced investors that have been on the podcast, and how willing they've been just to help people out.
Yeah, that's great, man. I definitely want to have a listen, and I suggest you guys do the same, guys and gals, for anybody listening or watching. And Brian, I also, man, before the show, told Brian, thank you very much. Thanked him for all of his service. He is an active duty Marine Lieutenant Colonel. He's stationed at the Pentagon, and you've had your 20 years in service. So you're about to retire less than a year. Yeah.
Yeah. 348 days from now or thereabouts, it really depends on, how much vacation time I credit towards retirement, but it's the end of a long chapter and going to be the beginning of something that's, frankly, very exciting for me. I'll be moving into multifamily real estate field full time, and be able to do, something else that I absolutely love. I wouldn't have stayed 20 years in the Marine Corps if I didn't love the Marine Corps. But 20 years is a long time, and quite frankly, it's a career that's hard on the family. So
Yeah.
it's time to make the move.
Well, man, congratulations. And again, thank you very much for your service. Sincerely, I have a number of family members in the service, and not having served myself, it's just, it's amazing to know there are individuals like you that are willing to make the big sacrifice for all of us. And so just genuinely, appreciate it. And thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that too.
Yeah. And Brian, so you were a graduate or earned your graduate degrees from University of Utah, Naval Postgraduate School, man, and you've been investing in real estate since 2007. So good track, strong track record up until this point. You've been crushing it, doing really well. And you're also an advisor in Michael Blank's deal maker mastermind and in his, his elite kind of investor club. So I thought you were a perfect guest. There's a lot of individuals that, are kind of in that a similar position where they're trying to go to the next stop, next phase. Mm-hmm. They just don't know how. You've done it. You've been there, and you've put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it. So I think our listeners are going to get a lot of value from today's show. So let me turn it over to you, if you would. Man, tell us about your, give us your story, give us your background, and maybe leading up to now. I'd love to hear it.
I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I was not part of a wealthy family. My dad is an amazing person, and one of the hardest working people I have ever met in my entire life. And, he instilled, a lot of work ethic and a lot of, really important values in me, from day one. My mother too, of course, but I remember one day, he pulled me aside. I was, probably 16 or 17 years old, and, probably right at the phase where I was getting ready to leave the house. And he just gave it literally like 30 seconds, and it had such a big impact. He basically said, "You can call me for advice on anything you want to, and I will give you advice." And then he's like, "But there's some things that you need to look to other people for." It's like, I have never done well financially. I have never figured out how to become a millionaire, how to be rich. I've tried several times. I've had a couple of businesses. Like, I've never figured it out. So if that's something you want to do, I'm not the person to ask, so that got me. Yeah. Wow. It was just one of those things where, wow, exactly.
How old were you again? Would you say you're just leaving for?
16, 17 years old. It was right about the time that I was transitioning. I graduated high school at 17, started college at 17. So it was right around that time, and
that's a statement. I think when you're 16 or 17, you're probably a little bit floored or taken back or whatever it was, right?
Well, I think my dad had also always told me that I had champagne taste on a beer budget. He's just like, you like the finer things. I haven't been able to give you the finer things. You're the type that really, out of me and my siblings, I kind of, as a teenager leaned towards like the designer clothes and everything else and the trendy type stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't so much anymore, but at the time he'd always say, "You have a champagne taste on a beer budget. And, if you want that stuff, fine, but, I can't help you." And he was wise enough to, at least point me and say, "You need to find somebody.
Yeah.
If that's what you want, you need to find somebody who can help you." So, it took a long time for that advice to really sink in. At first I was just like, okay, yeah, whatever, but I kept on thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And, fast forward a couple of years later, I get a degree in math. You mentioned University of Utah, but I taught at the University of Utah. And the first class they gave me was one that we, in the math world, we call it math for poets, and, maybe we were a little snobbish because we were really good at math and poets aren't, but it was a class that went over interest rates, and payment plans and investment plans and annuities and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I started realizing, there's power in investing. There's power in getting those returns. And so I started reading books. I read, Richest Man in Babylon, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, mm-hmm. all these great books that have kind of the same philosophy where you get your money working for you. You put your money into assets that pay. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be a college professor. You know, I'm at the University of Minnesota. I had just started a PhD program, and September 11th happens. You know, I literally started PhD program 2 or 3 weeks before September 11th. Had zero aspirations of being active duty in the Marine Corps. And, you know, September 11th changed everything for me, you know, so decided to go active duty for 3.5 years. And trust me, I tried to get the recruiter to let me, you know, go active duty for 3 or 2.5, you know, 3.5 was too long for me at the time. But, you know, I enjoyed serving. You know, it was a job that, you know, I was proud to have in a lot of ways, you know, and it didn't pay a whole lot at the entry level, but, you know, I make a good salary now. But, you know, I kept on reading books like that, and I started thinking, well, how can I start doing this? So I decided, number one, every time I move, which is often, I'm going to buy a new house, you know, because those are assets that are going to appreciate over time and, you know, are going to, you know, help me build my net worth. So I started buying single family houses, and, you know, quite frankly, you know, I started thinking about commercial real estate, and I immediately dismissed it. You know, it was just, I think Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad or Cash Flow Quadrant talks about commercial real estate, you know, as opposed to single family. And I looked at that and I thought, I can't do commercial real estate. I'm like, I had zero exposure to that. I'm not in a position where I can I don't even know where to start, you know, but I thought single family home. I'm like, I can do that. You know, I can buy a single family home. That's not a problem. So started picking up a couple single family homes. Couple deployments got in the way, a couple kids got in the way. Marine Corps decided to send me to Naval Postgraduate School for another degree, you know, and that got in the way. So put the investing on pause for a couple of years. And it wasn't until about 2016 that I started thinking, I really need to pick this back up, you know. So started reading more books, you know. Once again, I started reading single family books again. And, you know, I remember one by Keller that really impacted me. You know, it's the Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And he talks about single family, and, you know, it just lit a fire in me. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to get into the single family business. I'm going to start buying. And, you know, he's got a formula. You know, you buy at a discount, you put 20% down, and yada, yada. And I started thinking, okay, you know, I've got to save to put 20% down, and then I've got to rinse and repeat. And I figured if I run a really tight ship financially, I can buy one house a year. And I'm a math guy, so I pulled out my Excel spreadsheet, and turns out it was going to take 60 years for me to be financially independent, you know. And this time I'm like 40. I'm like, I can't wait till I'm 100. Anyway, one thing led to another. I picked up a couple of multifamily books, and that really appealed to me. You know,
You remember which ones they were?
The first one I read was by Brandon Turner, Bigger Pockets, you know, and it's how we bought a 24-unit apartment with little or no money down or something like that. But and it's a really quick read, you know, it's probably 30, 40 pages. And I went through it in like a couple hours. I'm just like, he's onto something, you know. That's amazing. It's like buy one, get 23 free, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I looked at it. I immediately recognized the ability to scale, you know. So instead of buying one cash flowing asset at a time, you know, if I bought a 6-plex or an 8-plex or a 10-plex, that's 6 or 8, 10 cash streams, you know, revenue streams, with one purchase, with one escrow, with one due diligence period, with, you know, one roof and, you know, one driveway, one yard to take care of. And I realized really quickly that there's economy of scale. And also the nice thing about it is commercial real estate is valued largely based on its income stream, you know. And I bought my first single family house right before the market crashed. I had one tenant that stayed for a full year, and literally the day they moved out, you know, the stock market crashed. and I had like a 4-month vacancy period. Anyway, so I had lived through there, and I had just started closing on the second one when all that happened. But anyway, I had lived through that, and I was a little worried about repeating with many more assets. But multifamily is very resilient during recessions. And looking at the COVID recession that we're in right now, it's still a case. I mean, commercial real estate, office is taking a big hit, retail is taking a big hit, and multifamily, I mean, it's not all unicorns and roses, but it's doing better. And in past recessions, multifamily has always been the first one to make huge gains, leaps and bounds past the other ones. So that really appealed to me. And, I started looking at multifamily houses by myself. I sold my single family portfolio, so
How many did you have?
I only had 2, but
Okay.
the nice thing is
you sold them all, get out of there.
Yeah, I had a 6-figure paycheck from each one of those that I sold. So I had a little bit of money in the bank, and I'm thinking, okay, what can I afford? And I started looking at the 6 units and the 8 units and the 10 units. And, after I remember walking out of one of them and just scratching my head and thinking, how do I know that's a fair price? And I didn't. Like, how do I know this is actually going to work? And I didn't, and I realized I didn't. So, like the next day, I was listening to Michael Blanc's podcast. He talks about his online course. I'm like, that's exactly what I needed. Pulled out the credit card, and
Deal analyzer comes in your email, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. I get his deal analyzer. I get access to a lot of his material, and I'm like, okay. I liked it. I moved to DC. And incidentally, Michael Blanc used to live in this area. He just moved to Atlanta area, but he had a big conference here, like right after I moved in, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to that conference.
So I'm going to pause you here because I kind of feel I know where the back half of the story is heading. And before we kind of move to that, there's a few things that I want to hit on from what you've said so far. Brian, you served as a Marine. You serve today, still 20 years your country. And I'm sure there are more than a few lessons learned: leadership, determination, servitude, all the things. One of the ones that I remembered from my CEO in my professional career, he told me, oh, you know what? When I was a Marine, it taught me that leaders eat last. It was one of the just off the cuff things he said. And that always stuck with me. I go, yep, the leaders eat last, and everyone else, goes through. And I'm sure your family and, people that you serve today as your investors and, being a good steward, I'm sure they appreciate those lessons. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I didn't understand that quote. As a junior officer, they told us that, and I didn't understand what it meant, but really it's partly the servant leadership thing. But I guess what I didn't understand is, I'm going to eat. All right. But what leaders eat last, ended up, meaning is, if I eat last, I am making sure that all of my Marines are fed and taken care of. And if I approach every part like that, where I'm the last one to get any benefits out of this, they're going to be taken care of. And we do actually, my partners are on board with this. We actually take the same approach with our investments. We're the leadership of each one of these investments, and we will eat last. So if there's an issue of, do we pay ourselves or we pay the investors, the answer is going to be the investors. And we are going to eat last every time. So that's one of the lessons they bang into your head from the very beginning, And
I thought I would touch on that one. And then to pause you, also, there's so many similarities between our stories. It's not funny. I'm glad that we took the time to interview. But what made a lasting impact to Rich Dad Poor Dad, as many, but I love The Richest Man in Babylon. It's by George Clason, and if you haven't read it, it's like a little itty bitty book. It's probably this thin and this big, and it's probably like $2 or $3 if you can find it. Half price books, and it has amazing stories and lessons on it on like how to manage money, right?
And it's story based,
Uh-huh.
it's not like,
Arcad, I think, was one of the guys'
yeah,
name.
and there's like 4 or 5 different stories, and each one of the stories teaches a different lesson, and
The,
it's, one guy trying to get out of debt, and then, another guy who ends up being the richest man in Babylon.
yep.
But yeah,
the,
that's,
the five laws of gold
hmm
are in there as well. He who has it, the more it accumulates, and then yeah,
yeah,
don't change don't chase some of the riches. One of the ones that stuck with me big time was like, hey, don't go after returns that are not reasonable, and
yeah,
then don't trust your money with the jewel maker
yeah. Or
or
you're gonna get
brick
the
maker
glass
was trying to
beads
buy
back.
jewels.
Yeah,
Sorry to
yeah, you
talk
get
over
glass
you.
beads. No,
Yeah,
it was a great book.
yeah,
And incidentally, it kind of makes me think that you know, um, going a little political. I mean, when you look at other, like the socialism, or the equality issues, you can take as much money as you want from the rich and give it to the poor, and guess what? They're going to end up being rich again because they have learned the lessons that are in the richest man in Babylon.
yeah.
So the redistribution of wealth thing. I mean, if you really understand wealth and you really understand like the 5 laws of gold,
Mm-hmm.
that's the difference between the top 1% and the rest of the 99 who are, fighting tooth and nail to try to, make their lives better. But
Yep.
yeah, no redistribution project in the world is ever going to work because those laws are fundamental.
Yep.
You
Got
can
to change.
redistribute once, and 5 years later, those same people who practice those laws are going to be in the top 1% again.
Yeah, we got to change that education, own it ourselves, right? I
Yeah.
think like your dad told you. Um, my dad never told me that, but my dad is still working, and
Mhm.
he's well into his 60s, and so is my mom, and they're the same. They never created wealth or figured out how to do that, so it was not that they were keeping anything from us; they just didn't know how to do it. And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until our pursuit of education, pursuit of knowledge, how to obtain, create, and achieve that financial freedom that are like, oh, okay, let me go figure out there's a repeatable process and a step to do that. So anyways,
Yeah.
those are awesome. I just want to touch on those. If you're not
Yeah.
taking notes for Brian, you need to. I'm doing, you may not see my pen, but I'm doing
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same. The Brandon Turner 24 appointment
Yep.
story. I don't think I've read that book, but I think I've heard that story once or twice. And but
Super
anyways,
quick read. I mean, you could probably do it in, half hour, 45 minutes, but
okay.
quick read. But like I said, it was just one of those that I had never considered multifamily before. And I think I picked it up because it was either free or 99 cents on Amazon. And I was on a deployment, and every time on a big ship in the middle of, one of the oceans, and we don't have Wi-Fi, we don't have access to like
Got to get a book.
Amazon.com. Yeah. And so every time we went ashore and I had Wi-Fi, I would literally type in real estate into Amazon.com and just start anything that was less than $2. I would just buy, buy, and go back on the ship. And I'd pick up 1 or 2 books that were, in the $15 to $20 range each time. But, I'd go through, and I probably picked it up because it was a 99-cent book or something like that. And, I actually put off reading it at first because it was an apartment one. And, limiting belief in the back of my head, nope, you can't do apartments. But yeah, so that triggered a lot of things, led me down the path. I knew I needed help, or I realized that I needed help. So I got into a coaching program, and, coaching programs don't work for everybody. I'll tell you that up front. I had some very specific goals. I wanted to accelerate my success. I had already committed to being successful. And another thing about Marines is, mission accomplishment comes above all else, and that's something that I've been doing for the last 20 years. And I just said, I made it my life's mission to be successful at multifamily. So I was going to do it, but I decided that, okay, I'll take a little chunk of change from, proceeds of these 2 houses, and I'll give it to Michael Blanc very gladly, and gain a mentor, gain an education, and gain access to his network, and that ended up um, being kind of another catalyst for me because, I met my partners at Four Oaks Capital through Michael Blanc's network, so I would say, it doesn't have to be, the same route, but I think those are fundamentals. You need to have good, solid partners. And if you don't have good, solid partners now, you need to find a network full of people who are potential partners and hop into that. So I got the education, I linked up with the partners, we got, a couple of deals under our belts, syndication model. So, we find the deal, we find people who are willing, who want to put money into real estate. And the great thing about it is most of our investors aren't the type that have access to these types of investment opportunities. I remember reading, and it's been a while, but I remember reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he talks about how the rich have access to a lot of investments that the poor people don't. And syndications are one of those. Syndications in real estate are one of those things that a lot of the poor people don't have access to. But just in the information age we're in, and quite frankly, there were a couple of legislative changes that made it more accessible. But now we are taking these deals where a fairly low risk apartment complex is going to pay mid-teens in annual returns. You can't get that in the stock market. So we're looking for people who want an alternative to the stock market. We're looking for people who want to invest in real estate, maybe diversify some of the money they have, and earn some pretty steady returns on the back end.
Yep. Yeah. So a couple of things. If you're a passive investor, brand new, and you're kind of listening, maybe the first time, Michael Blank is a multifamily coach, educator. It's one of the individuals that, has a big program. You drop some heavy coin, which if you know me personally, I did the same thing Brian did. I joined about four different programs in 2 years and dropped a little over 65 grand. And it kind of propelled me, the same as Brian. It sounds like I started in 2008, similarities. We did like 8 deals in Texas. They're smaller deals though. So, but, once I hit multifamily education, a few different programs, you get in the network, you get in the, one of my other guests called it the hive. He said, oh, this is the hive. Once you get in that, it's like everyone's, focused and centered around doing the same thing. You meet partners, you meet investors, you meet other individuals. And that's not the only way to get in, but it is it's a fast forward button, to get into a group or team or people, network with other like-minded individuals, which is, another route. Brian, you did a networking event this afternoon at 12 o'clock, Central. I wasn't able to come because of hanging out with my daughter, but you're putting together like-minded people. We can all meet investors, general partners, operators, all that kind of good stuff. So
and part of it's kind of a pay it forward type thing, and I don't charge anything for these, these networking events, but we had around 30 people on the line today,
Awesome.
And I do this one every Friday. Look me up on LinkedIn, reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place to find me. But anybody who's interested in real estate, you need to be on something like this. You need to find a group of people. And I'll be honest, it wasn't the first time that I logged into, the Michael Blanc network that I found my partners. It wasn't the first conference I went to. It wasn't the first meetup, but I was persistent. I think that's one of the keys is, I'd meet people and I'd be like, yeah, I kind of like him. He might be a pretty good partner. And, I'd keep in touch with him. I send him emails, text him every once in a while, and then, go to another big conference or another meetup group and, she could be a decent partner. Let's keep her on the list, And it wasn't until probably five months after I signed up for the coaching that I met the people that I'm still partners with. So
yes, absolutely.
So the more opportunities you can get yourself in front of like-minded people, the more likely you are to come away with a partner or partners.
Yep.
So
I heard Brian say, in the as a Marine, he learned, hey, mission. What was the exact phrase? It's mission is the most
So mission accomplishment
mission accomplished. So
is our number one priority, and they tell you this at like boot camp,
yeah,
the two most important parts of, being a leader in the Marine Corps, number one is mission accomplishment. Number two is troop welfare.
yeah.
Other services, we'll put those on equal ground. We don't put them on equal ground because, unfortunately, the name of the game for a Marine is sometimes you got to say, go attack that hill,
Yeah.
go into enemy fire and do this. So, if troop welfare in the Marine Corps was our number one priority, we would never send people into harm's way. So, that's why we do it like we do it in the Marine Corps. There's a good reason for it. I think in the business, you need to take a more,
Sure.
it needs to be a more equal approach, and it's not a, accomplish the mission at all costs. Nobody's going to die.
But I did hear your persistence through mission accomplished, which is what your life goal. Now that you're out of the Marines, and we're not talking about, a literal war between countries, but we're talking about, man, your family is now, there, how to provide for your team, your crew. And so it's like, well, this is my mission. And I bet you, like you said, it wasn't the first meeting, second meeting, next conference, but it was eventually you knew that that's what's, what was going to happen. You were going to pursue multifamily. And so today you're in $7.5 million worth of real estate, which how many, tell us about, is that number of doors, projects, whatever terms you want to talk in?
4 different apartment complexes, 168 doors is where we're sitting right now. All of them are South Carolina. We've got another project under contract. I won't talk too much about that because it's a 506B and no advertising. But so we have 3 apartments in upstate South Carolina, and I'm really bullish on this area. So are my partners. So if you're looking at a map of the Southeast, draw a straight line between Charlotte and Atlanta, and basically there's already a straight line drawn. It's the I-85 freeway, but that freeway is one of the fastest growing areas. Charlotte and Atlanta are 2 of the fastest growing cities. I read a report yesterday, the day before, saying that Atlanta is one of the only cities that's still getting rent growth, even in the midst of COVID, and so Charlotte. So the same factors that are driving growth in Charlotte and Atlanta right now are driving growth all along that I-85 corridor. But it's a secondary market, so that actually plays to our benefit. There's a little less competition. We're not competing with hedge funds on any of the assets that we're going after. So.
Hello. You're listening to the 5 Talents Podcast. I'm your host, Abel Pacheco. If you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you're serious about achieving financial freedom. Are you ready to create your own path through multifamily investing for yourself and your family? Then I know you're going to appreciate our Investor's Guide to Multifamily Investing. It's titled Tackling Commercial Real Estate the Easy Way. We use this guide to invest ourselves in $93 million worth of real estate. So we're going to show you the basic mechanics of multifamily syndications and how to evaluate your next passive investment opportunity. So the best part, if you subscribe to our podcast now, leave us a review and a rating. I'm going to give you a free copy of our ebook. So please take a moment to do that now. Once you've done that, go to 5tcre.com/ebook, 5tcre.com/ebook. Make sure to let us know you left a review, and we're going to send you a free copy. So thank you so much for subscribing to the 5 Talents Podcast. We really appreciate it. What was your very first deal, and did you already partner up with a team? Did you kind of try to do it? Did you try to muscle it in yourself, or did you have 2 or 3 people? Or tell us about your first deal, and then maybe tell us about your last one. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so first deal was a portfolio. It was 2 different apartments, a 16 unit and a 39 unit, Spartanburg, South Carolina. I had already met Eric Shirley, and he's one of my partners right now. I I remember, Michael Blanc uses an app called Slack for his network. And, you tap on somebody's picture, and if their contact information is loaded, you see it, and I don't remember why, maybe he was posting some stuff that I liked, but I tapped his picture and I saw that he had an 803 area code cell phone, and I'm like, that's South Carolina. And I know that because, my wife's grandma calls a lot and she lives in Columbia. My wife grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. So it was one of the areas that, South Carolina was my focus already. And I remember that started the conversation. I reached out to him, I either texted him or called him like, hey, Eric, I see you're in South Carolina, let's talk. So we talked off and on for, a month or two. And in the back of my mind, he was one of many candidates. But as luck or fate would have it, we found out that we were chasing the same apartment complexes.
No kidding. That's awesome.
We both had LOIs drafted for a place called Tanglewood in Columbia,
Forget about competing, baby. Just let's team up and let's take it down, right?
And that's once we realized that we were competing, Eric said, let's collaborate, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I need a partner. Check. I talked with him a handful of times. He was on my short list. Check. And so we agreed, over the next couple of days or weeks that anything in South Carolina, and I think North Carolina was also in the deal, anything in those two states, we would collaborate on, and so Eric's best friend, Brian Mallon, was already one of Eric's partners. So partnering with Eric got me two partners, so we started putting in LOIs, and, each LOI had both of our company logos. Mine at the time was Streamline Capital, his was Third Ave Capital. So all of the LOIs had, two logos on it. And then we finally got the first one under contract. It wasn't, the first by a long shot, but it was probably the fifth or sixth one that we had put a joint offer in, together. We get it under contract and we sit down, we look, and we're like, okay, we're gonna have to raise, $1.5 million, maybe up to $2 million. Let's find one more person, and Eric said, hey, I've been on weekly phone calls with this guy named Todd. I think he's perfect. And it turns out he was, he brings Todd into the conversation. We start talking, immediately liked the guy. And that was the beginning of Four Oaks Capital. We didn't call it Four Oaks Capital. We didn't, at the time it was, now it was 3 different logos, on everything that we sent in. Fast forward a couple months later, we all start talking about future deals, and we realized that we had a really good thing going. We realized we worked together well, we liked each other, we complemented each other, and we decided to form Four Oaks Capital. And that's, so that was getting through the first deal. I mean, you asked all the details about it. So yeah, when I initially put the offer in, it was a very loose arrangement. Actually, it wasn't that loose because, both of our names were on the LOI, but we started out with a loose agreement to partner on anything inside 2 states, and, evolved into Four Oaks Capital. And, since then we closed on another 33 unit property. We closed on an 80 unit property, and, we're always looking for the next deal.
Awesome. How much what was the capital raise, or what was the capital requirements, and, maybe a little bit of that on that first deal?
First deal, we thought we were going to get away with, 1.4 million. All right. But something I didn't, and this is lesson learned, rookie mistake on my part, is I didn't pay attention to the debt service coverage ratio enough, and so in our initial underwriting, we were thinking we were going to get 75%, potentially loan to cost, and I'm talking to a couple of brokers, and they're like, yeah, if it's a Fannie Mae loan, we will give you up to 80% loan to cost. And we're like, okay, and so we thought, okay, we're going to be conservative. Let's put a 75% loan to cost in there. But like I said, I wasn't paying enough attention to that debt service ratio. So we got the term sheet from the lender, and, it wasn't as nice as we thought it would be. So we went back, we ran the numbers, and the numbers still worked, So we said, okay, now we have to raise 1.7. To be honest with you, we thought the returns were going to be, when we were at the 1.4, we thought our returns were going to be like 20% annualized. And we're just like, oh my gosh, this is a smoking deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then those numbers came back. Incidentally, we had decided to advertise 15 anyway. And then the numbers came back and our analysis put us right in that 15 mark. So it's like, well, now we're exactly where we are advertising. So let's press. So that was not a big deal. But then about a year ago, if you remember, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were both coming up to their lending caps, politicized issue. Congress finally, extended their cap and let them lend more money. But in the middle of that, we were supposed to close. All right. Actually, the end of our contract was a year ago this week. So about this time last year, our rate went from, we hadn't locked yet. Our lender was saying, hey, if you close today, you're going to be at a 3.8. And we were like jumping up and down. Our term sheet actually said 3.89% interest rate. But overnight, almost, our rate went from high threes to low fives. A 1.25 point, not basis points, percentage
full points.
Yeah.
100, 200 basis points.
Yeah, 125 basis points, And so our proceeds got cut. And going back to the officers eat last, we had over $1 million sitting in the bank. We had enough money to close, and we had $600,000 taken from our proceeds. We were able to negotiate a little bit back, and then fortunately rates went back down slightly. We closed it at 4.9, but what we ended up having to do to make the deal work for the investors is, instead of doing a 75-25 split, we moved it to a 90-10 split, because we had advertised a 15% annualized return. And after diluting the returns by bringing an extra $500,000 in capital in, our number was less than 15. So we just, we moved the needle, so we are going to get paid less on this deal.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers worked out so that, we're forecasting, still mid-teens for our investor returns. But, we're only going to get 10%. But overall, there are some other factors. The first deal is a momentum deal. And, first and foremost, we would not have gone forward with it had we not believed we could hit that 15%.
Yeah.
That was rule number one. Can we hit that 15%? And end of the day, we thought we could hit that 15%. We knew we weren't getting paid a lot for the deal, and so we decided that, we'll take it on the chin on this one, because this deal will also give us momentum and give us credibility.
Yeah.
That's why we were okay taking the pay cut.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuggets in here. Let me, I don't want to go way past your time, but just to kind of summarize. So if you're a new general partner or a new principal, one of the first lessons that Brian shared with us is make sure the debt service coverage ratio is over 1.25, and you're basically,
Yep.
Just whatever the debt service is, that like your mortgage payment, make sure it's enough net operating income to cover 1.25x or greater. So we had to come with a little bit extra. They absolutely were willing to do it. And the law of the first deal was another nugget that I heard, which is, man, the hardest one is the first one. Once you get your card punched in the multifamily side, now you're experienced, and now you've got some credibility with the lenders. It's easier to get a loan. It's easier to probably raise capital. The brokers take you a little more seriously. You're a principal in a deal, and then the conservative side. So they thought it was a 20. They thought it was a 20% return, which is absolutely smoking. But they didn't tell investors it was 20. They told investors a 15% return. So under promise, and in hopes to over deliver. Well, in this case, the numbers changed from the lenders. So man, whatever you still promised, you could actually still hit, because you weren't adverts, weren't explaining it was 20 or telling them 15, which is money.
And if we would have started with 20, we would have had to backpedal,
Yeah.
and we may have lost some of our investors after that.
It's not a good look at all, right? But they did the right thing initially, under promise, over deliver. Absolutely, just great wisdom. And then the lender side, man, choose a lender that you absolutely know will deliver. If you've never used them before, get a couple different ones. I'm been in that situation myself. And that's it's a hard one to stomach, especially when you got some earnest money down. You've put your risk capital, you're in due diligence, et cetera. All the hard costs are out, and you're like, they've got you. It feels like over a barrel, and you got to close. But understood.
And we were willing to walk away from the money. I mean, our first big decision point came. We had $100,000 in risk capital out, and we talked about it, and we essentially said we will walk away from that money if it's the right thing to do. And like I said, the investors is what we really thought of. Because end of the day in this business, if you can take care of your investors, what I think every syndicator should aspire to is, when you get out of a deal, aka sell it, and you return investor capital back plus the proceeds. Okay, you want every single one of those investors to turn back to you and say, where's the next deal? And you want those investors to put that money back into your deal. So, we don't mind the officers eat last philosophy, because we are looking long term. And long term, if we last on this, $4 million purchase price, $2 million raise, 3, 4, or 5 years from now when we sell it, every single one of those investors, we want them to say, okay, here's my money plus my returns. Can I park it in your next deal? And now instead of $2 million, we have $3 million there. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, for sharing. I think that's good insight for a lot of people listening in. So before we go, what is the best way to get into your world? How do I connect with you if I'm a new investor, if I want to network, partner with you, if I'm doing deals in your neck of the woods in the Carolinas or Atlanta? What do I do? How do I contact you?
Best way, fouroakscapital.com is our website. There's a form you can fill out immediately. We also have a free ebook on there that discusses, how multifamily and stock market differ. Kind of compare and contrast. But you fill out one of those forms, and somebody from Four Oaks is going to get in touch with you. It may not be me, but somebody from Four Oaks will contact you.
All right. And thank you very much. Those good resources. So, and Brian, is there anything that we didn't touch on today? Anything you were excited about talking about? I just didn't ask. Is anything, any last wisdom? Pretty much anything. Don't worry about time. It's yours.
Yeah. So the thing I'm most excited about right now is the podcast. It's new. I think it's exciting. And I learn more from that podcast than anybody else. So Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. You can also get to that podcast on our website. It's fouroakscapital.com/podcast. And that's our podcast homepage. So that's probably the thing that I'm most excited about, and, all available at our website.
Yeah. And what's the format? You said you have a unique kind of a.
Yeah. So we bring on an experienced investor and an aspiring investor.
On the same show.
On the same show. So we focus on the experienced investor for about 15 minutes, and it's like an abbreviated podcast episode, any other podcast. And then, about 15 minutes in, we introduce the aspiring investor, talk about them for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then at one point, I'll turn to our aspiring investor and say, hey, we've got, Abel here on the line, who is super experienced. He's doing exactly what you want to do in the future. What do you want to ask him? And, from there, I just sit back and watch the magic happen.
Oh man, that sounds pretty cool, dude.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty cool, Brian. I think that's a good format. So if you guys are interested in, because you've got an experienced person that knows a little bit more, and then you've got a new aspiring, a little less experienced. So the questions or mindsets are different. Mm-hmm. And it's really good to have those. When you're choosing a mentor and a coach, I tell, investors with me, I tell other syndicators, other operators that are, soon to be or aspiring, like you said, you got to have a few different sources of knowledge. And I like the mentor that has 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 doors under management, because he's done it. He's been there. He's doing it now. And you can kind of learn from that. However, I also like to learn from somebody just a few steps ahead of me, because they're going to tell you tactically what steps you need to take, the here and the now. And then if I have a peer group or somebody that's less experienced, that everyone views it through different eyes and different paradigms. And so it's really going to help you get some really great knowledge from various, insights, and bringing them together on one show. It's pretty cool. That's awesome format.
Yeah, it's been an amazing experience for me. I mean, and I know a lot of the guys who've been on the show have also gotten a lot of value. Some of the aspiring investors are getting exactly the help they need. And one of my experienced investors reached out to me recently and said, hey, I really liked so and so, and I'm so glad you put us together. We're collaborating together now on X, Y, and Z. So there's benefit to everybody with that format. So I love it. I'm excited about it, and it's just starting.
It's good stuff. Well, good, man. We're at time, and I appreciate very much you allowing me to interview you. So again, my name is Abel Pacheco, Mr. Brian Briscoe. Thank you. Appreciate it. If you guys are interested in learning more about our company, 5 Talents Commercial Real Estate, you can go to our website, 5tcre.com. That's 5tcre.com. And you can get some other education and some podcast interviews, ebook, a lot of downloads as well. So if you like something you heard today, please reach out to Brian. Please leave us a review. Don't be afraid to put that 5-star rating on it. And we hope that you learned something something today to help you. So again, Abel Pacheco signing out. Mr. Brian, thank you very much, man. Thanks for your time, brother.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of the 5 Talents Podcast with your host, myself, Abel Pacheco. Each week, we're going to bring you interviews from industry experts and commercial real estate investors who followed their dreams and achieved massive success. Before you leave, let me ask you a few questions. Did you enjoy this episode? Did you learn something valuable? Was your mind stretched to what's possible and what you can achieve? Do you want other experts just like the one you heard today? If you answered yes to any or all of those questions, then please take a moment to subscribe to the 5 Talents Podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and most importantly, leave us a written review. Tell us what you liked, tell us your favorite guest, give us any feedback. I'm excited to learn and improve so you can get a more valuable show. So thank you again for subscribing to the 5 Talents Podcast.